are.
Market Fire Live, episode 86.
Is it 86? Are we that
86.
close to 100?
We're getting close. We're going to hit it this year. We're going to
Sweet.
do it.
I like
Yeah.
it.
So long as someone's missus doesn't force him onto some long vacation where he's not allowed to live stream.
Actually, that one's next weekend, so,
Okay. Well,
Anyway, go ahead.
we're going to jump into some stories today, but if you don't know who we are and what we do here, I am Danny Deals. As always, I'm joined by my illustrious junior co-host, the big man, right over there. And we go through and we discuss some business news stories. I love doing that. And we do it sometimes once a week, sometimes twice a week. Sometimes somebody's on vacation and we can't do it at all, but that is not
Danny's
neither
just
here.
jealous. That's all it is.
I am not jealous. Colorado is not a place I want to go on vacation. Uh, Colorado is the Oklahoma of the West. So,
sure it is. All right, go ahead.
all right. So this one is so I need to preface this story with a lot here.
Uh-oh.
Uh,
Danny's got a disclaimer. Oh, my God.
uh,
Usually
uh,
I'm the disclaimer guy.
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
If there's one thing I despise in humanity, it's our penchant towards cynicism. I'm in the middle of writing a book. It's called Reject. I think that's what it's going to be titled. I know Big Man's also writing a book. Uh,
Texas by Texan. Coming
there
soon.
you go. And so I'm about 78% done with this. But this book is called The Three Rejections, or in it talks about the three rejections of the steel mind. It's basically, as long as you've known me, is this you tell me if this is true or not.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a weird way of looking at things, right?
That is by far the nicest way I would put it.
Okay, but sometimes you think I have a weird way of looking at things.
You have a unique perspective on most issues that is not shared by most people.
Okay, so when I say I reject cynicism because I think it's gross and I think it's bad for your soul, and I think it's
Correct.
better to be optimistic, hopeful, and all that other stuff. So part of cynicism is the German word Schadenfreude, which is to to relish in the downfall of others, and I despise that also. And I tried to I try everything I can to avoid doing that. However,
However,
when the Berlin Wall fell, people cheered, right? The Iron
mm-hmm.
Curtain fall, people cheered, right? Civil rights, people cheered. When something good happens, there is inevitably fallout that affects the personal lives of bad people.
Correct.
That is to jump into this to say the corporate journalists are getting fired at an unprecedented rate, and I'm excited about it.
See, this is one of those unique perspectives where,
Yeah.
okay, well, but you're also making the blanket belief that all of those people are cynics.
I'm not
And
saying that they're cynics. I'm not saying that they're cynical. Here's what I'm saying. I'm saying it may appear as though I'm going against my own values and principles by rejoicing in the firing of these scumbags, but I'm not because they're scumbags and their firing makes society better.
okay, so look, what Danny's saying roundabout here is Danny believes, and this is I'm not going to argue with him too much on it, is that a lot of what we consider insider news,
Or
daily
journalists.
news,
Yeah,
journalists, right, and stuff like that, in the environment that, oh, by the way, we've created in the last 20,
yeah,
25 years, right,
right.
which is not driven by news, but driven by clicks and money and advertising, right,
Sure.
that a lot of our news by these same people has
Right.
become very cynical about the world because guess what?
And
That's what people read more often than not,
oh
right?
yeah, though yes, exactly. And so I'm not just so I'm saying, if it's so when the book comes out, someone's going to reference, they're going to go back and find Market Fire 86, Market Fire Live episode 86 and go, "Hey, you said don't be cynical, don't embrace Schadenfreude, don't celebrate when, people when bad things happen to people you dislike." And what I'm trying to frame this as is This isn't simply people I dislike. These are
Sure.
these are evil people
Okay.
who are getting
So the news that
so
Danny's trying to get to with
so
this
when the Third
disclaimer,
Reich fell,
yes.
there was guys who worked there as guards, and they said I was just doing my job and I lost my job. Well, being a part of the Third Reich ain't a job that you get to have. So
Okay, that's a
when
pretty extreme example. I get
correct,
what you're saying, but that's a pretty
yeah,
extreme example. Go
it
ahead.
is an extreme example. So when all of these uh, journalists, these corporate fascists from the LA Times are tweeting about how hard it's going to be now that they have to figure out, do you want that latte with foam?
Okay, all right. As always, Danny does not speak for the Market Fire
I
podcast
am
or the
going to
big man.
celebrate.
Danny's views are his own. So, all right,
Yeah,
look, this is not something that's brand new. This has been happening for the last several years.
correct.
Okay,
But
it
it's
is getting
happening
harder
so
and
fast now.
harder for the journalist world, meaning newspapers and
Right,
major news networks and whatever. It's getting
correct.
harder for them to make money, right? Because of, look, we all get our news in today's world from social media outlets, whether it's Facebook or TikTok, depending on your generation, right? Or we have it framed for us by setting up Google News, where we just get information as it
Right.
comes out about certain things. So we're not out there. Very few of people, especially in today's world, are seeking out the Washington News Journal or the, you know what I
Or
mean? Whatever your
so
paper may be that
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
enjoy.
So I'll give you a good example. Dave Portnoy got railroaded by the New York Times. And Dave Portnoy is a, Northeast liberal raised by Northeast liberals. And he said his father had a real hard time when he knows the truth about his own son, reading in the New York Times a falsehood about his kid, grown man, but nonetheless, and he goes, my dad really had to overcome that because it was rough, and that's how deep seated some people, boomers, belief is in the corporate press. So right now, the layoffs at the LA Times have been epic.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite guys, and now a fellow Texan and Austinite, Michael Malice, has been retweeting, and he, of course, is dancing on their proverbial firings a little harder than I am. But essentially, what's going on here is this is just my speculation. Uh, the ability for corporate journalists to compete with people like us is very difficult because
Well, of course, because their overhead that they've created over the years, when they did make all that money,
yeah,
they've made it impossible from themselves from an equation standpoint, right?
correct,
And we're talking about big ones. We're talking about the Insider, the New York Daily News, Paramount, the Los Angeles Times,
yeah,
right? Sports Illustrated. These are all companies that at one time were titans, right?
yeah.
They were titans, right? Um,
and and this is called market forces. Okay,
correct.
these corporate journalists don't believe in a free market, and oopsie daisy, the free market came to eat their lunch. And you know there's also another angle here that other people might not be thinking about, but would you exist in a low interest environment, an artificially low interest environment? The great economists like Friedman, well, Friedman's okay, but a lot of other market economists will tell you, you encourage malinvestment. You encourage people to make bad investments because the LA Times reaches out to a large bank and says, "Hey, we need a huge loan, 10, 20, 30 million dollars at 1% interest or 2% interest or
Mm-hmm.
3% interest." They get this loan and they proceed to invest into stupid things, right?
Correct.
So they're not judicious with their dollars because their dollars came cheap and easy and quick. So I'm
It's today's version of Blockbuster, right?
correct,
That they had no desire at the time because of the money they were raking in to seek the future at all, to look
correct.
toward the future at all. So they didn't adapt. You and I talk about adaptability for years now, right? And your ability to move and change and alter your way of business around that. Where, look, podcasts and news outlets like yours and mine, right? Fire Market Podcast, All Pod Media, we have the ability at any given moment, we could completely pivot to a completely different source of
Right.
information, talk about different things, add different things, take away different things. And these companies just aren't set up that way, right? And they pay traditionally you would have people that come become names in their own way in news broadcasting and writing news articles that nobody cares about that name anymore. Nobody cares at the bottom. Look, I read news almost all day every day about a variety of different subjects. I cannot tell you, and again, I am not a grammar or critic about the usage of words. I'm a Texan. I talk horribly. My
Yeah.
punctuation is awful. But
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
amount of news that I consume on a daily basis, it has gotten horrendous.
Oh
Grammar,
yeah.
spelling,
Yeah.
all like I see from major news outlets this article that is just filled with misspellings and things
Yeah.
that you have to
Dude,
take from
you
context
just
clues.
called this the Fire Market Podcast. That's not even our, but that's
Market
not the
Fire
point.
Podcast,
I'm just kidding.
whatever. See,
What I'm
again,
saying, no, no. Well, here's what I'm saying. That's an example of how much he doesn't care.
yeah,
And I actually, it used to irritate me, but over time, I started to find it not endearing, but it was inspiring. Here's a guy who doesn't care. He's moving so fast that it doesn't matter. He
hey,
said it wrong. He glossed right over it and
it
kept
doesn't
moving.
matter. That is
And
today's journalism, right? Like, that's
yeah,
today's journalism. It's just the way it is.
and so I think it's a combination of malinvestment, and and listen, there are all of these national polls out there that media trust in the media is at an all-time low. And there are people, and so part of where my glee and holding back the cheers comes from is people who believed that they could lie to you and that they would. So the term that Michael Malice uses, which is incredible, is factual but not truthful. And I call it the football statistic.
Okay.
So you know how the football statistic will like, this is the first time that a Thursday morning game has resulted in a rainout in a, and so
Yes,
like,
there's a stat behind anything,
yeah.
right?
And so they will use those factual statistics, and you go, well, the way you applied or the conclusion that you drew from the statistic that uh you know um let's create a fake statistic. uh
Yeah, it's the
Hispanics
first
create
time a left-handed kicker has missed a field goal on a Thursday morning when the temperature was 32 degrees, right?
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, in the context of journalists, they would say, like, I'll give you a great example from the Los Angeles Times. This is a political headline, but at the end of the day, that's the story. Uh, the blackface of white supremacy. It was a black libertarian named Larry Elder who was running for governor, and they said he is the blackface of white supremacy. Now, here's the problem with that. He's the black guy. So when these people are on Twitter or on X or whatever and they're complaining, I saw one tweet where one of the journalists said they blamed the Biden administration for not doing more to block Elon Musk from buying Twitter. And the reason why they're getting fired is because people are going to. My favorite thing about X in its current form is that a journalist will post something. Uh, for instance, one of the journalists that got fired posted that the current president never said that coal miners should just learn to code, and he got community noted, where they gave a link to the video of the current president saying just that, but they said he wasn't the president yet. He was still the former vice president because it was in 2019. So they are being factual in the sense that the president didn't say that because he wasn't the president yet. He was the vice president, whatever. But the
Uh-huh.
point is, the guy said what we said he said, and he implied exactly what we said he implied. And all we have to say to you is, hey, figure out how to put your beehole on OnlyFans. Figure out how to code. Start asking yourself in the mirror, right? Look in the mirror and go, would you like that with phone? Like
Okay,
that. I mean,
what you're referring to is journalistic integrity and how it's degraded over time.
yeah,
Now,
there is no such thing as journalistic
there's a
integrity.
reason I've been
They're
quiet the
dirty
last several.
fascists.
There's a reason I've been quiet the last couple of minutes. First, Danny said blackface, and you mentioned politics, which Danny and I don't talk about on this podcast for various reasons.
Right.
It's like at the dinner table on Thanksgiving, you just don't do certain things like that. But so
Tell
I
that to my
try.
cousins. They ruin everything.
I try to be quiet during those parts. But what the point you're trying to make is valid. There has been a deterioration of journalistic integrity because that there's no there's no money behind it, right? In for these bigger companies that have lost their journalistic integrity, they figured out that there was they look some of these people, these famous people, news media people, attempted for a while to keep their journalistic integrity. There has been some over the last 5 years or so, some people that have said, "Hey, I'm going to maintain my journalism." It has never worked out
Oh.
well for them from
So,
a money
to,
standpoint, right? It just
well,
hasn't.
that's not. So here's what I would say. Here's where I'm disagreeing with the big man. Uh, Bari Weiss, the famous journalist from New York Times, left the New York Times, started a Substack. Several of these people leave
Sure.
their huge corporates, they go start a Substack. Now they're in charge of their own destiny, they're making their own money. And here's what I love about that. The corporate journalists who are currently getting fired have never put out an article, have never dared to be daring, have never challenged the status quo enough that someone try to come for their paycheck, right? So Matt Taibbi, who is a politically opposed to me, okay, Aaron Mate, I don't know, is also politically diametrically on the opposite of the political spectrum. These are guys who left their big corporate gigs and started their own. Tim Pool, Tim Pool's, people have their
Sure.
opinions on Tim Pool. I don't know if he's diametrically opposed to me or not. I don't care. These are all guys who, I mean, Tim Pool worked at Vice, Univision, all these big names, and he's out there doing a podcast somewhere in the woods of Virginia, and he has, if he goes live, he will have more listeners and viewers than CNN.
Well, yes, you're right. They've all moved on to their own because then they don't have the middleman of the corporate America holding them back
Right,
or being responsible for them, right? So they can say and do their own things without anybody saying you shouldn't and having a
right.
name that's not yours to protect, right? Part of this article is these layoffs, these unionized boycotts, some of these things that are going on are in 2000 late 2023 early 2024 now. This article is making the argument that these things are happening faster than everybody thought that they would, right? That social media, your average everyday person, podcasts like ours that just provide our take on big news that's going on in the world or specifically America most of the time, is subverting their clicks. It's
Right.
subverting their opinions and their
And
ability to make money. And look, that can be devastating for any business, but you've again got to be able to pivot and go along with it. And that, I mean, you have a look. We have a certain news network in the last year that has had to rebrand some of their quote unquote news to use the word show instead of news so that they don't get sued every episode based on the content that's being provided, right? So you when you get into wordplay, I don't know that you can call it a news network anymore, but that is what
who,
it is, right?
I think I know what you're saying, but I'm just saying when it comes down to it, I don't think there's no one I trust. Uh, there is no one I trust to determine what is and is not the truth, or who is, or what is and what is not news. If someone wants to call, we are a news outlet. We're not, but
Mm-hmm.
we are.
We're a news
So
show.
whatever,
Whatever.
whatever doesn't get us sued.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I'm doing everything I can not to jump up and down, not to be excited. I'm holding myself back because the more tweets I read of these people, the more I'm like, uh, uh, I have no blood left in my head because it went somewhere else.
The one I can't stand is when they become a caricature of their news.
No, because
That's what I can't stand.
I'll tell you exactly what it is. We're now finding out that however we characterize them, and they fought it. They fought this characterization of I'm not some whatever, and then
Right.
they turn around and the minute they don't have their title, the minute they don't have the benefit of the LA Times Writers Guild to
Mm-hmm.
protect their careers, they were that monster that we promised that they were before.
Of course.
And I will just say part of this too was I think that the LA Times Guild, which is the writers' union for the
Mm-hmm.
LA Times, which it stacks a win on top of a win. Okay,
Danny's not a big fan of unions. Go ahead.
no, so you have a union representing. Yeah, well, wait, I have carpal tunnel. The union needs to get me therapy. I was typing too hard. Uh, this kid from Kentucky was wearing a hat. We need to take him down. Uh, that story, by the way, lost the Washington Post a supposed like nine figure deal. It was like a
Of
nine
course.
figure deal they got sued for. Uh, I'm talking about the Covington kids, but regardless, I'm doing everything I can not to cheer. It's very difficult. It makes me very excited to see these people suffer because they're evil. Now, let's move on to
Well,
someone even
let me
more.
make this statement before we move on.
Yeah,
I think people on the other side of this argument, and the reason these articles are being written, is they are trying to make the argument that if we lose these institutions of news and media,
right.
that there will be no more integrity. Is That's
Um,
the opposite side. That's why they're saying, "Hey, this could be scary if we don't have
yeah,
independent,
yeah, yeah.
right,
Right.
paid."
And these are the same people that said Walmart's going to come into your town and they're going to wreck your mom and pop business. But and they're not wrong. That did happen. But at the same time, in a lot of situations, Walmart opened up and that's the only place you can buy groceries that aren't expired.
Right.
I
Did
know
it?
people who live
Yes, it
in
did
small
destroy
towns.
some local businesses, but but ultimately, with the tax increase from those sales at Walmart or whatever, it benefited that local economy. It also brought other businesses into the town. The town got bigger. Their
and then
taxes
and
got bigger.
then
Yada yada yada.
and then a lot of those mom and pop shops figured out. Listen, there's a I forget who it is. There is a custom boot maker whose business was just overrun by a big boot shop. I think it was a boot barn
Mm-hmm.
or something. Opened up in their town, and well, guess what? The guys who are running out to oil rigs and need a specific kind of boot, he can't carry them all. Boot barn comes in, he becomes a custom boot
Yeah,
manufacturer.
he
His
finds a
son sets
niche.
him. He found a niche. He set himself up a website. He's making more money than ever. He's making boots for celebrities. I'm trying to get him to make my boots. But the point is, if if we cannot mitigate, eliminate, or manage competition without without creating ripple effects with things we don't want.
Well,
So
they're trying to use fear mongering to not change. Right?
yeah,
We
and
can't we can't not change because of fear. We have to
so
continue to go.
I forget what the specific story was, but one of the journalists who was complaining, who I wished was getting fired, was one of the journalists who, during the whole like David Dobrik scandals or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
she had reported incorrectly something that kind of ruined one of the guy's lives because she incorrectly reported something and then just refused to do anything about it, refused to
Right.
apologize, and so and she was like
Even if she
going
did,
on,
retractions are on a much lower. You know what I
wouldn't have
mean?
mattered,
Yeah.
wouldn't have mattered. So she was going on TikTok interviewing all these people. And so to see her complaining that it's like, well, what's going to happen if we're not here to protect people? I'm like, but you're the one attacking people and ruining their life. So here's what I'm saying. People are like, what will happen if the corporate press dies off? What will we replace it with? I don't know. What do you replace a cancerous tumor with? That's all I'm saying. You replace it with nothing. You take it out of the host and you pray it doesn't keep growing. So I'm happy. I hope that, listen, if the LA Times Writers Guild goes bankrupt, I will fly from DFW to LA to their offices to wave the flag of Texas, and I will just, we did it, baby. We're gonna
Of
be a
course you will.
country. Huh? All
Of
right,
course you will. All right,
let's
what's our
jump
next
into
story there, Danny?
this next story. Is another one that makes me happy and excited. Okay, the good people over at Cummins received a $2 billion fine from the EPA. You better believe I read this story. I went down to the Dodge dealer and I ordered a brand new 2500 Cummins.
Okay, but all right. So the story here is that the Cummins diesel folks, on some Cummins diesel engines installed a bypass to the air quality, sensors that come on all vehicles in today's world, right?
Correct.
They all have O2 sensors and all kinds of sensors or whatever.
Yep.
Here, so somebody, I'm sure, does it say in the article who actually took them to court? It was the
EPA.
Okay, it was the EPA themselves that took them to court, right?
So I
Which
don't
is
even think the EPA took them to court. Um, I
maybe
so
they settled before they got there,
I
right?
think that's what happened.
So
I
look,
think
and that's the EPA's job, right? Environmental Protection Agency. It's its job. It's to protect things and find things. But look,
shouldn't exist, but
this is
okay.
not a surprise to me. In
Yeah.
today's world, you realize my first car was a 71 Chevelle Malibu, right?
Yeah.
It was a Chevelle. Beautiful, solid steel car. When I
Yeah.
pushed on the gas, there was a lever attached to that gas that went to the throttle, and there was a spring to hold it back when I let off the gas. Okay?
Yeah.
There were carburetor springs lines, right? When I hit the brakes, it pushed the pressure into the brake to stop the car. Now,
Yeah.
in today's world, when you hit the gas, it tells a computer brain in the car to increase the gas in your engine, right?
Right.
When you hit the brake, it sends a sensor to to the brakes
Yeah.
to stop. So in a world where we now control everything in automotives with a computer
Yeah.
instead of levers and stuff like that, are
Right.
you telling me that there's not people out there that are being paid by General Motors, by Ford, by everybody on the planet to figure out a way that the computer says one thing, but it's saving us money over here?
Yeah. So Volkswagen had to pay in 2017's it paid 1.45 billion dollars because it had a what they call the diesel cheater in there. So when the government or a government agency plugs in their computer, the
Mm-hmm.
software is programmed to kick out data that some would say is false.
Correct.
Now, now if I was the attorney at Cummins, I would say not only do we not admit to any wrongdoing, we're simply saying that this is how the data identifies. Sure, is it letting out more CO2 or whatever per square inch than allotted? That could be the case, but it identifies as less. And in 2024, I feel like
You can't just use the word identifies. I get what you're saying, but
yeah,
look,
I can, and I
here's
just
the
did.
reality: $2
So
billion.
it's
Who cares? They
yeah,
they've made that 20
yeah,
times over. Okay,
Cummins doesn't care at
Cummins
all.
doesn't care about the $2 billion.
This is
Yeah.
this so part of understanding this is that um this is again kind of a political thing, but these companies realize two things can be true at the same time. They cannot follow the law and actually sell a product, right?
Well,
This is
I
roughly
don't
1
agree with
million.
that necessarily, but yes, it makes it more difficult, more expensive. And look,
Right.
big companies and people think, okay, just because it's your car and you can die driving it, that these big companies care. They don't. Okay,
Mm.
it's just numbers as it is, right? That's what recalls. There's a number cruncher, there's a bean counter that is paid to figure
Right.
out whether it's worth it to pay people that died in fiery car crashes or make a recall, right? Like
Right.
that, there's literally bean counters that figure that out and tell them, and sometimes they don't recall because it's just going to cost them less to pay off the 100,000 people that are going to experience that while owning their car, right?
I happen to know someone who had an unintended acceleration in a Mitsubishi, and at first I thought it was absurd, and I started asking people who know about this kind of thing, and they go, "No, it's not absurd at all. It's a completely reasonable. Like there's a bunch of computers in this car.
Mm-hmm.
It's not mechanical. It's a bunch of computers, and this is up in the Rust Belt. Something rusts, sends the wrong message. Car takes off. It makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. Manufacturer goes, ah, that's unfortunate. Let's just give you a new car. Here, just sign this non-disclosure
At
agreement.
100%. 100%.
So,
I actually went through this with my 2007 Toyota Tundra.
yeah,
I don't remember specific. It had something to do with the brakes, right? Sticking or whatever, right? And they sent a recall, and they were like, "Look, if you feel unsafe driving your truck, then we'll pay for a rental car for the next 3 weeks until we can get it into right what." Like there was some genuine fear from Toyota
yeah,
because some bean counter told them, "Look, it's going to be more expensive to ignore this than to make a
right.
recall and spend all this money." Look, Cummins spent apparently there was 960,000 vehicles, right, that have been recalled to fix this software issue,
Right.
right? That only cost them $60 million. So the
To fix.
recall cost them nothing, right?
Yeah. So what I'm saying is there these bean counters are sitting down. They're going, hey, listen. Here's how this fascist regulatory agency that absolutely it's unelected. It shouldn't even exist. It's not even constitutional. Here's how they're going to calculate the fine. The fine is X. So we're going to pay $2 billion in a fine.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to pay another 60 million if they force a recall.
Right.
So 2.6 billion is what it's going to cost us. Now, if we try to build it the way these fascist regulators force us to build it,
From the
the
get.
vehicle the vehicle's not going to run right. It's going to get terrible fuel economy, and we're going to lose hundreds of billions of dollars.
Right.
So what should we do? We're going to put the freaking cheat device in it
Right.
because they're not cheating. Because the consumer has no problem. The guy who bought his Cummins that has a cheat device in it, he's not pissed off.
Well,
He's the he's the
then you
only
get
guy
into
here
how
in
many of
Dallas.
those are actually bringing their coming. You get a recall, right? I still get them. We've all gotten them in the mail. You get a
Yeah,
recall about your vehicle. There is a large percentage of those people that throw it in the garbage, that
yeah.
never get
Let,
whatever the recall
let,
was done
let me
because they
tell you.
don't see it important.
So there's 960 trucks from
Nine
Dodge
hundred
Ram,
sixty thousand.
960,000 that are affected by this recall. 959,000 of those already got their EGR valve deleted. They've already completely wrecked this. This thing is, they don't want this thing anywhere near the dealership. They don't want it anywhere
Mm-hmm.
near the prying eyes of the EPA. These are the guys in Texas, born and raised here, live here.
Mm-hmm.
These trucks are registered in Oklahoma, Montana. They ain't even registered here because they can't get through the inspection.
None
So,
of these articles and you and I have done different stories on different car recalls and different stuff
yeah,
like that. I always, I've never been able to find in these articles what percentage of those recalls are, like you just said, brought back. Like, okay, let's just call it, right, a billion trucks, right, that are
right,
affected by this. How many of those trucks did does Cummins have bad addresses for because the truck's been
right,
sold? So they go
right,
to the address on file, right, that Cummins has, but that truck's been sold 3 times since then, so it never gets
right,
to the owner. It's
right,
not like they turn around and advertise these recalls in a way that your average person sees it, so they're never
right.
going to get noticed. How many of these, again, do people just ignore and throw in the garbage because they think it's junk mail or whatever? So out of the 1 billion trucks that they've
It's 1 billion,
recalled,
but yeah,
right, 960,000 of them, I'm sorry, 1 million trucks that they've
yeah,
recalled, what percentage of that typically comes in and gets fixed? I mean, is it 20%? Is
Listen,
it 50%? Is it
let me tell you something. I know diesel truck guys. I'm not a diesel truck guy yet, but I know plenty of them, especially guys who own Rams. I get the impression that they're not the kind of people who are showing up for this. They don't care.
no? Well, and look, and if I was still pulling a 8 horse trailer or 4 horse trailer or you know what I mean, stock trucks or whatever, then I would be a diesel guy.
Yeah,
Guess what? For a person that doesn't do that, there's no reason for you to own a diesel. They're a pain in the ass. Okay?
they really are.
Let me tell you
They're
from a guy
getting to
that's
be.
worked on cars his entire life. Okay,
Yeah,
working on diesels is a pain in the ass, and they're more expensive to maintain, right?
right.
But if you're pulling a fifth wheel, or you're pulling an RV, or you're,
Yes.
you know what I mean, like I said, pulling a 4 horse or 8 horse trailer on a regular basis, then they make sense because they're much more powerful. They
Yep.
last much longer when they're maintained
I
properly.
so I'm gonna. Yeah, we're well outside of the statute of limitations. When I was a young man, I used to go watch street races in downtown St. Paul. There was a brother named. When I say brother, I mean a black guy. There was a brother named. He just called himself Tex. That's all he did. He
Okay.
called him Tex. Cowboy boots, hat, the whole kit and caboodle. Not something in the cold winters of Minnesota that you expect to see.
I love that the fact that the
yeah,
guy dresses a certain way in another state can just
yeah.
name himself Tex. Like
He's
that's
a
any
culture.
right.
He's
Like
a whole. He's a
based on
whole
the way
culture.
I never sets foot in the state of Texas, but because I
No,
look like
he.
this, no, I'm just saying that
Yeah,
right.
yeah, I know. Yep. He was from here though, and he had a 7.3 a Power Stroke Ford, and it had dang near 1,100 horsepower. And he would show up to drag rate to street races,
Mm-hmm.
and guys in Civics would be like, "There's no way you could take me on." Uh,
Whatever.
Well, here's the thing though: these guys in Civics had real horsepower, not a joke volume
Yeah,
of
and their
horsepower.
car weighs nothing, right? I mean, it's yeah,
But we dropped the flag. These guys hit a quarter mile. Tex smoked everybody.
sure.
It was the first time in my life I was exposed to the concept of a huge pickup truck that sounds like a semi truck going on the road, and it's smoking it because he's like, I have 11 or 1,200 pound feet of
Mm-hmm.
torque, and he's just I
Yeah, and
don't
in about
know.
every doing that on a regular basis, on every 10,000 miles or so, he's gonna have to replace his rear end because of the torque. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's bending it
he's
out of place,
rebuilding it.
right?
Yeah,
You know
I
what I
know
mean? That kind of stuff.
everything you're saying is correct, but that's a lot of horsepowers.
Yeah,
Let's jump into this next story.
you got.
Let's follow up on our good friends over at Spirit Airlines. So, so the feds told Spirit and JetBlue that they're not allowed to
Right,
merge.
correct.
So JetBlue says maybe we're going to drop out of the merger talks altogether. Which so here's where I'm confused. So like Spirit Airline, this merger, the government says we're not going to let you do it.
Right,
So Spirit says so JetBlue says to Spirit, we're probably just done trying to make this happen.
right.
Okay. And Spirit says to JetBlue, if you do that, we're going to sue you for non-performance.
But see, okay, look, we live in a world, and we always have, that you can sue anybody for anything. If you have the
Right.
money to do it, you can sue anybody for anything and make your case. That doesn't mean you're going to win it, but you can make your case. What you can do, and what sometimes those lawsuits are for, is to make your life more difficult until you do something that I want you to do. Sometimes it's cash, just pay me money. Sometimes it's, getting you to do something else that you didn't want to do, or a part of it, right? And that's all Spirit can do. They can say, hey, I'm going to sue you, and they can, but that doesn't mean it can go anywhere or that they would win. The government has said this can't happen.
Right. And so I guess there's a clause in their merger that when if and when a regulator denies our claim to merge or denies our
Mm-hmm.
right to merge, that you have to appeal. And if you decline to appeal, then we get to sue for non-performance or sue for specific performance. I think that's odd. I don't get it. Makes no sense to me. I would now. What has happened is Spirit's stock has taken a huge tumble.
Of course.
I did a little more research into this. Apparently, when the talks with Frontier fell apart, Spirit had to fork over a piece of their operation because that was the deal.
Mm.
So so Spirit bet their entire existence on the merger with JetBlue. So
Well, and
JetBlue's
JetBlue
looking
benefited it from it, right? Like because JetBlue stock, okay, you're going to acquire right all these routes, you're going to acquire all this, you know
right
what I mean,
all
hardware
these
and things of that
aircraft.
nature. Their stock went up. It almost doubled. I think it was 60-70%. Right, it went up when this announcement came out. Of course, Spirits declined at that point because they're the ones that would be purchased, right? And Spirit actually, when the government said, "Hey, you're not going to be able to merge," earlier in the week or end of last week, whenever it was, about a week ago, um, Spirit's stock went up, right? Okay, you're still going to exist as a company.
Right,
But then you turn around and go, okay, wait a minute. Now you're going to use whatever earnings you may have had on a lawsuit against JetBlue. Yeah, that's not going to get my money. I'm out again, right?
right. Yeah, so I think that this is I don't think this is going to end well for Spirit. I think this is overall. Listen, I'm going to be honest with you. I forgot JetBlue existed, and I get the. We all did. So, because we live in Texas, we don't really fly JetBlue.
No,
We're Spirit. We're Southwest
we're
country.
Southwest country. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. I mean, yeah. So what I'm getting at here though is, I doubt this merger is going to go through. And my guess is the reason JetBlue made a very public statement that that they'll probably pull out of the merger, which makes complete sense given that regulators don't want it.
Correct.
Here's my here's what I think. Here's a conspiracy brain at work on this one. They knew that this would tank Spirit stock. They knew that this would ultimately put Spirit in a situation where they have to use the law to force specific performance, and they
Mm-hmm.
simply don't have the war chest to accomplish that. And their goal is we're going to push Spirit into a financially destitute situation where they file for bankruptcy and we just buy it all for pennies on the dollar anyway.
Well, according to this article, they this is still going to cost JetBlue money, right? Like according to this article, it says, according to their agreement, right, JetBlue and Spirit's agreement, if the contract was terminated due to failure to obtain antitrust regulatory clearance, JetBlue would be required to pay Spirit $70 million and pay Spirit stockholders in excess of $400 million minus the sum of the prepayments previously paid. So what this is basically JetBlue made an agreement to purchase a certain amount of stock, right, from stockholders of Spirit, and they're probably the ones causing this lawsuit, right? Because hey, JetBlue is going to give me X amount of dollars, right? For my ownership in Spirit. And we're talking about people that have to disclose their ownership. Like anybody over 10% that owns 10% of any given company has to disclose that they own a large portion of the company, right?
Right,
And those are typically the stockholders that when a company wants to come in and acquire, they're the ones who you're making a deal with, right?
right.
They're not making a deal with the guy that owns 100 shares of Spirit,
Of
right?
course
That
not.
person's going to get whatever it is when it, you know what I mean, flips over. So it's probably the big time stockholders that are turning around and saying, hey, we're not getting our money. And now you're giving me a lesser of a product because this isn't going through because they want somewhere in the middle, right? Because if I
Right,
keep my Spirit and it dies, I get nothing like you and I talked about earlier in the week, right? If
right,
Spirit's not able to combine itself with another company, it's just going to die. It's going to go
right,
bankrupt. It's not going to fly anymore, right? And so if I'm an investor in Spirit, like a big time investor, I own 10% of the company, 5% of the company, whatever, then I'm going to get nothing if they go bankrupt, right? Because I'm
right.
last in line. Right, this is what happens. Stock. If you own stock in a company, you should probably know that you are last in line when it comes to debts. If that company goes bankrupt, ask the people that own General Motors stock when the auto crash, right? General Motors became a brand new company, issued brand new stock, and if you own stock in the previously, you got $0, right?
Yeah, that ended up coming up and in a different lawsuit. in which the Takata airbags they were recalled,
Mm-hmm.
and a judge attempted to fine General Motors because they used those airbags in one of their vehicles, and Mary Barra, the CEO of General Motors, said, "Judge, that was old General Motors. We are new General
Sure,
Motors."
exactly. And those liabilities of old General Motors means nothing. Like it,
Yeah.
that's the protection of bankruptcy, right? That no
Yep.
longer that company no longer exists. So you can charge them. And guess what? General Motors did that with everything they could there at the
Yeah.
end and beginning of the new company. But look, so the fact is
Hey,
this person's
I,
facing
if it was up to me, I'd be filing bankruptcy every 7.5 years.
these investors are looking at getting nothing potentially for their Spirit stock. They sue JetBlue, right? And they get somewhere in the middle between what they were promised and what they get. You know what I mean? If it comes out all right. But JetBlue is still going to hand over in the neighborhood of 400 to 500 million dollars, even if this thing never happens.
And let me tell you, it's all down the drain. That 500 million,
Yeah,
470,
no,
it's
it
all for naught
no.
because Spirit will go bankrupt, and somebody's going to scoop up their carcass, and that is my if I was Danny Day Trader and not Danny Deals, I would be shorting their stock, but I don't. I don't have any position in any stock related to the airline industry. I am all in one basket, and that basket is currently on fire. Uh, so
I can't say that I'm not in with airline stocks, but it's definitely not JetBlue, Spirit, or any of that kind of stuff.
yeah,
I have no
uh,
dog in this particular hunt, but it's gonna wash out like business like this does. That means nothing to your average person, but it will mean something when you're flying to certain parts of the country that only fly to certain parts of the country, and you
yeah,
no longer have this option.
right. Hey, let's do this next story, but let's just do number 4 later on a different day.
Okay,
And so let's just do number 5 here.
sure.
Uh, I heard about this. I saw this, and I was afraid to read any of the stories. But there was a 23andMe breach. The
Yes.
class action suit said the genetic testing company failed to notify customers that their personal information was compiled into curated lists that were sold on the dark web.
Okay, I put this story on Danny's thing today on this today because I find stories like this funny. Not because look, it's sad that people's data was stolen and yada yada and sold and blah blah blah. However, I find it a little hilarious when people put themselves in situations that things are bound to happen. At what point does anybody think that giving someone their DNA and all of the things that may be attached to doing that, right? Your phone number, your address, your credit card, all of these things, and just giving it to someone to send you what you hope is correct information, why does that seem like a good idea to anybody?
Yeah, I think the great comedian Bill Burr once said, "So you sent your DNA to the internet," which is like, yeah,
What do you
um,
think's going to eventually happen? Is there nobody that thought if I do this, this company that didn't exist 25 years ago, right,
yeah, is
is
gonna
going
do the
to
right thing.
safely take care of this information?
Yeah, some of us made hasty choices. Okay, forgive us all. My favorite stories about DNA testing are these Reddit threads where the guy goes, "So my sister bought everyone DNA test kits for Christmas, and our mom started freaking out
Of course.
because we have 5 siblings, and 4 of us are blonde and one has dark hair." And she
Hmm.
said to the
Hmm.
dark haired one, "Hey, everybody doesn't need to take the test.
That's right.
Only
That's
one
right.
of you needs to take it."
Yes.
Because
Uh huh. We've all heard of it. We've all seen a TikTok story or whatever where I didn't know I had a daughter or a son because I
or
was never
or I
told,
or
or
I found out that my son and or daughter was not mine.
right, or brother or sister or whatever, right? Like, again,
What?
I
Yeah.
wish there was a
What?
way for you to find those things out without this kind of test.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
we've all seen articles like this. But the lawsuit is essentially not even. It's sad because the lawsuit's not even about the data breach. It's about the
Right.
fact that 23andMe didn't disclose it properly.
Right.
Right?
And the data breach targeted specific types of customers, uh, those with Jewish and Chinese heritage. Oh,
I don't even know this word that's in here. Ashkenazi Jewish,
Ashkenazi, yeah.
Ashkenazi Jewish heritage,
Ashkenazi, yeah.
and they
They
appear to have
Ashkenazi,
specifically targeted.
yeah.
I
So
don't. Why?
yeah.
I
So
Is there a reason
uh,
why? Danny, do you know a reason that just those two won? I mean, look, the breach
I,
is anybody, right? But
yeah.
why specifically those two would be
I,
targeted? Like, is there a
I
reason I'm not aware of?
I don't know why the Chinese part, but the Ashkenazi. I mean, well, uh, listen, I'm a person that is willing to say what I believe, regardless of if it's an acceptable or unacceptable opinion. I don't know what to say in this regard. I don't know why anybody would target this DNA.
I'm sure they got way more information than those two groups of people, but
Yes.
why an article, a statement would include this target? You know what I mean? I don't understand why that would be relevant or why someone specifically would want that information unless it was from if China is you know what I mean,
Yeah.
but I don't know, right?
So I
So
have someone in my extended family who works in DNA research at one of the largest research institutions
mm-hmm,
in this country. And they told me, and this is not a person who would like or agree with any of my views.
mm-hmm.
Uh, they told me, oh no, all of this data goes right to China. All of this DNA data goes right to China, and they will develop viruses around this data. And he deals in viruses at a virus lab, and this was before the great events of 2020. He told me this information. I said, "Oh, they're going to create virus," and then 2020
Okay,
happened.
I'm not willing to make that conspiracy loop a jump, but I will say this. I it's is it surprising in 2024? It should not be surprising to anyone that any major player in the world has your information.
Yeah,
Okay,
that shouldn't
let me tell
like
you something. I don't care how off the grid you are. I don't
yeah
care how sovereign citizen you are. I don't care whatever it is you think you are. The United States government knows everything they want or need to know about you. There is
yeah, and that
nothing that you can do to stop that.
and in my forthcoming book, Reject, I discuss that even if the situation is dire and bleak, that doesn't mean you give up. That means that you
Of course
just
not.
keep you. There's always listen. People ask me like, "Oh, why do you use these secured chat apps like Signal or whatever or Delta Chat?" They're
Sure.
like, they the federal government broke into Tucker Carlson's Signal, and I was like, yeah, but the point is, I'm not Tucker Carlson. I'm not talking with foreign dignitaries. Like,
Right.
if they like, listen, my buddies and I want to tell each other dick jokes without the feds saying. So, for instance, this kid did get caught in, I think, London or something. He made a humorous threat to his buddies on an airplane. He said, I'm going to kaboom the airplane or something.
Oh yeah.
He's in
You
a chat group he's a teenager goofing around with his pals, and he's currently facing charges because the local government got an alert that
right.
somebody sent that text message. And guess what? When you're at an airport, if you connect to the airport's Wi Fi, they have all your phone. They have
Well,
your
that's
whole
part
phone.
of the terms and conditions you accepting. Hell, when you go to McDonald's and connect to their Wi-Fi, they're
Right.
able to collect an unbelievable
Which
amount of data on you.
hey, which people ask, why do you have separate devices? I have one device that I do not connect to any sort of public Wi Fi and has certain information on it. And it goes, hey, I go, hey, listen, you're not wrong. I'm not stupid. I'm not naive. They
Mm-hmm.
have all of my data. But if there is something small I can do to make it harder for evil fascists, I'm going to do it.
Well, there are two different levels, right? I'm not saying just because you know that anybody can break a car window and carjack something doesn't mean I'm not gonna I'm not gonna leave a envelope full of cash sitting on my dashboard, right, where anybody can see it. I'm not saying that okay, just because you know you're
Right.
unprotected, that you should do dumb things. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying when it comes down to it, the United States government, the Chinese government, and whoever else is out there that really wants it can find out just hell, there's some kid, I'm sure at my kid's high school, that can find out anything about you that they wanted to know. Okay? It's
Hey,
just the world that we live in.
uh, recently he said something, and I was like to someone in my family, I go, oh yeah, those court records are public where we used to live. You can just go look them up.
Mm-hmm.
They go, no way. I was like, here's the website. And so then we proceeded to spend the rest of the evening, instead of watching the movie, we were just sitting there looking up our family and friends who used to live there and go, they went into foreclosure?
Let me tell you something, and this has to do with just kind of this same kind of the amount of public information that's out there, right?
Right.
My neighborhood that I live in Austin, Texas, or just outside of Austin, has one of the most active neighborhood Facebook sites that there is. Okay,
Yeah.
now and when I say that, I'm not joking. I think it's literally the second most used Facebook neighborhood site in the Central Texas
Okay.
area. Okay,
Right.
now, and what I mean by that is when something happens in our neighborhood, let's just say, for example, about a year ago when there was like 6 cop cars in front of a particular house in our neighborhood, right?
Right.
That Facebook neighborhood group, everybody
Lit
in
up.
the neighborhood was on it because the amount of information that just started coming out at the time, and then the next couple of days of photos
Yeah.
and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Information and court
Yeah.
documents and things like that are just people start putting out there, right, for everybody to see. It's haunting to know how little it takes for people to
Yeah.
get in your business when they really want
So
to.
so I've, as you know, as some of our audience may or may not know, I've lived in Texas for quite some time now, just about it'll be a decade this year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, back and forth, but the point is I've called myself a Texan for a better part of a year now.
As you
And
should.
my whole family, we all live on the same street now. And my sister sent our family group chat. She sent it and said, "Hey, this was on the neighborhood app or neighborhood Facebook group.
Mm-hmm.
Some cattle, because we live right down the street from a cattle ranch.
Sure.
A bull got loose from he got past the fence,
Right.
and he's just strolling through the neighborhood down the sidewalk. And
Yep.
I was just like, there are people in this neighborhood that do not use the sidewalk, which we have to pay for and maintain, but the bull is using it, so I'm not paying."
I think we call that bull's got more sense than you do. You know what I mean? But it
There is a
happens.
family in this neighborhood that goes on their evening walks down the middle of the street.
Right.
There is a sidewalk. We have a sidewalk. They all
Well, I
walk
mean, you
in
can't
the middle
fix stupid. Like you just
of, and then they have the audacity to complain at the HOA meeting that there are people who we're taking our family walk, and there are people zipping by us because you're in the middle of the street.
again, you can't fix stupid. And as a disclaimer from at least the big man, don't do stupid stuff like send your DNA to 23andMe when you look. I'm a
Where were you
believer.
5 years ago to tell me not to do that?
I'm a believer in that you don't ask questions you don't want the answer to. And
Yeah,
when you send your DNA to any of
to
these
the
type of
internet.
companies,
Right.
23andMe or whatever, you know what I mean? You are asking a question that you may not want the answer to.
And let me tell you, I did not get the answer that I wanted to get. But
Danny found out that he's 78% white.
I would, that'd be great, dude. Yeah. I found out that I'm not
uh,
even technically as Indian as I thought, but that's not the point.
all right.
Uh,
What's our next one there, Danny?
uh, we're going to go to prison. There's no way to talk
I
about
love
that.
this story. I
Uh,
love it.
so, this 14-year-old So
Yes.
big man, this is your story. Why don't you kick it off?
Okay. So in the last week or so, I probably, like a lot of people in 2024, spend too much time on TikTok
Yeah.
as a social media place.
But so long as it's you and Mrs. the big man also use TikTok, the
Oh yeah,
marriage is secure.
of course.
What I've discovered is what I've learned from these TikToks is when one of the partners is too into TikTok
Oh
and the
yes.
other is not, that leads to divorce.
I think there was a comedian that says whatever you're into, your significant other needs to be into. If you're into
Yeah,
crack, your significant other needs to be
it
into
needs to
crack.
be in a
Then that
yeah,
will work, right? So here's the deal. I saw this video. I thought what a lot of people thought, that then turned into a viral video of people reacting to this, let's say, negatively. And here's the thing. When Danny said 14-year-old girl, this is the 14-year-old daughter of somebody you would probably recognize the name of, Grant Cardone.
right.
Okay, her name is I think Melissa Cardone. So it's
No,
irrelevant. It doesn't matter.
uh, this is Sabrina Cardone.
Sabrina Cardone. Okay,
Yeah.
so Sabrina the teenage witch Cardone gets onto TikTok.
Don't.
Hey, Sabrina the
Her
Teenage
father is
Witch
a
was a
very
show.
litigious man.
Okay,
Okay,
anyway.
that's fine. That's
Okay,
fine.
Sabrina Cardone makes a TikTok, very high quality, by the way. It looks like she was in the studio, like, a news thing. Her
Yeah.
setup was better than ours from a news network standpoint. Anyway, she gets on, and I'm going to preface here this, or paraphrase this, and essentially says, as a 14-year-old, I, meaning her, will be a millionaire by the time I'm 20, and here's how I'll do it. And goes on to outline that how she will do it will be working for her father, doing she doesn't know what, right? She doesn't know, but working for her father, and will be paid in the neighborhood of $4,000 or $5,000 a month. That she will then use that money, because she has no bills to pay, right? And invest that into, like her father, real estate or whatever, and
Yeah.
those things, by the time she's 20 years old, will make her a millionaire. Now, the internet response to this was much as you would expect. This
Okay.
14-year-old girl has no idea, A, what she's talking about. Second, the privilege that comes along with a 14-year-old saying, I'm going to be a millionaire. Look, you can't, the people in this world need to stop, that are the children or related to rich people, that the first step of you being rich is with mommy and daddy's money. They just got to stop.
So, okay. First of all, there are going to be people who say don't pick on a child. Uh, the child put out the content. Somewhere along the line, an
Yes.
adult who is responsible for this child helped produce this content because this is very professionally done.
Yes, she didn't do
Uh,
it all by herself. There was a
of course
cameraman,
not.
there was an audio person, there was an editor, there was a lot of adults involved in the
And,
creation of
and
this content.
ultimately, her parents are, they say they're billionaires. I'm not going to dispute that because he is currently in $100 million lawsuit against defamation lawsuit
Sure.
against the former CEO of T-Mobile. So when you said Sabrina and referred to the TV show, that was fine. I was just like, we're a fledgling media company. Don't pick a pipe.
Uh,
Don't pick a fight with Grant Cardone. Number one. Number two, I am a commercial real estate agent, one of the largest real estate markets in this country, and he is a commercial real estate buyer. I would love to have Grant Cardone and Cardone Capital buy a
uh,
building with what is now currently referred to as the larger group, Broken by Real. We would love to have him as a customer.
sure.
I'd love to deal with Grant. All that being said, your assessment of what the daughter said. First of all, we were all teenagers. We all said silly things.
Of
We had
course.
silly ideas about our future. Secondly, I hope to be a father someday. I'm not a father. My goal is to get even wealthier before that takes place. The whole point, because there's only so much stuff I can buy, right?
Right. Sure.
The whole idea here is I'm gonna meet some nice gal, and she's gonna say, "Ay, papi, necesitas un papeles," and I'm gonna say, "Okay," and we're gonna have some kiddos, and then I'm gonna have this legacy, and then they're gonna be rich because I'm rich.
Sure.
Because once I buy a couple of things and invest in some real estate. It kind of ran out of stuff to buy.
It's
Now,
called generational wealth, right?
and isn't that the goal? I,
Of
I
course.
would like you to show me someone who says, no, I would like my children to be poor. What? Nobody wants their kids. Now, you cannot fault a teenage girl, a teenager, a boy or girl,
Sure.
for having a belief that they're going to be wealthy because they're going to work for their father, and that is in turn going to make them wealthy.
I agree with that. I think
So
14-year-olds, look, I think a 14-year-old, most 14-year-olds know the difference between right and wrong. Not to say that they don't make mistakes, but they do. She knew she's not so young that she didn't understand what she was saying. And you can
right,
look at the video and she's articulate. You can tell she's a very smart girl, right?
yeah,
She's very smart. She
yeah.
understood exactly. So my point though is, and
She did Iced Coffee Hour, which is our, I wouldn't call them a competitor, but it's a very popular podcast by two business guys. And she did Iced Coffee Hour, and the clips from that I haven't seen. I didn't listen to the whole episode because there's too many Joe Rogans coming out. Who
yeah,
has the time? Um, she
I'm
is
sure
very
she held her
smart.
own, but because she's probably a very intelligent, when you have that kind of parent, you can afford to go
Yeah,
to the best schools, the best tutors, the best
they're
whatever.
yeah, they're homeschooled. They don't even go to school. They
I
just
have no doubt. I have no doubt.
yeah,
Right. But so, and maybe that's the problem because we all talk about, well, you can afford to homeschool your kids with the best tutors, the best whatever, then maybe they don't get all the social interaction that they need to and stuff like that. My problem is not with her. It's
yeah,
honestly not with Sabrina Cardone or even her father, Grant Cardone, right?
right,
You are allowed to give, I have given my kids a life that I would have only dreamed of as a kid.
right,
Okay. However, my problem is with in today's world of I can turn on this camera
yeah,
and say anything I want,
right,
it also comes with ramifications on how people take that, right?
right.
So
Fair
it's
enough.
the privilege that maybe you can say that at 14 years old, because she is homeschooled with, she doesn't understand that your average everyday American, 99 out of the 100% of Americans, don't have a dad that's going to pay them $60,000 a year, not have any bills, and
Right.
teach you all of these things that are going to make you wealthy. So when you come out and say, hey, this is how it's going to happen, people are going to react to that negatively.
And in my whole thought on the narrative of quote unquote privilege. First of all, I despise this narrative. The whole goal of a family unit, should
Absolutely.
be to give their child every opportunity. Now, I made this
Every
argument
privilege
once.
they can.
If someone came to me we make up a scenario and they say, "Hey, you're a millionaire, you're wealthy, your kids will have plenty of opportunities, but if we give them this particular opportunity, it's going to make their life 10% better, but it's going to take away the opportunity from 10 kids who have no
Sure.
opportunity." You know what I would say? Screw those kids. Give my kid a 10% edge. Screw all. It's Listen. You know why?
Your
I
family's
have
first priority, right? Like,
that's I listen. If I have an obligation to be selfish for my children. For So even I have nephews right now, and if someone's like, "Well, maybe your nephew wants to eat this later, but here's this child who is hungry right now." I'm like, "Well, I don't know that kid. My nephew may want this later, so we're gonna take the Rice Krispie bar, and this hungry child's gonna have to figure out their own problems."
sure. And I get that, but
That sounds
you
so.
got to understand what the ramifications of that are, right? Like,
So here's what my view is. My thought is: Grant Cardone is not stupid. Grant
no,
Cardone understands the internet and internet marketing better than a lot of other people, more than
100%.
he gets credit for, more than his real estate investment portfolio. He understands how to sell things on the internet. My guess is they're going to launch their own homeschool course or their own Make Your Child a Millionaire course. We're going to teach them how to start a business that makes $70,000 a year while they're in school, while they're 14, so they can invest the money while you're taking care of them or whatever. That's
Sure.
what I think is going to happen.
And I'm not, look, Sabrina Cardone is probably more intelligent than I am at 14
Well,
years old, right? So I'm not even picking on her. Again, it's when you put things out there, you have to be aware of how
Conscious
they're
of
going to be
how it's going to
taken
affect other
and
people.
then the ramifications of those, right? Just because we have freedom of speech doesn't mean you are free of consequences of those
Right.
speech, right?
And what I am saying here is, uh, first of all, I hope she's a millionaire by the time she's 20.
Well, I mean,
Right?
technically, she's 14. She still is underage, so she is a millionaire because her father is one, right?
Yeah,
Even though I tell my kids all the time when they
you're broke.
say things like, Dad, how much money do we have? I say, You have nothing. You yourself are
Yeah.
poor. You have nothing, son. You are zero.
Yeah.
You are at zero, right? Or whatever. But I will tell you this coming from a person that I've been lucky enough, knock on wood, to give my children a childhood that is completely opposite of what I did growing up. And I've been
Right.
very, but a challenge that my wife was lower middle class, I was dirt poor. The challenge, though, that my wife and I have conversations of constantly is how do we teach our kids the perspective of being poor without being poor? Right? How do
So
you still give them that perspective that there are people out there that don't have what you have that you know what I mean. Eh,
yeah, and so I think here's what I would say. I didn't watch this TikTok all the way through, but you'll tell me. Is there any point in time where she displays gratitude?
no, it's very you
So
Grant
it's
Cardone-ish. You know how Grant Cardone speaks with
yep,
authority, right? With
yes,
hey, this is the way
yeah,
it is, and
and
he's not alone. A lot of these people
yeah.
that have money or have
So
created
so
themselves.
here's what I would say. In life, gratitude is if you have a position that you're always grateful for what you have, uh, two things. First of all, you can't when you are in a state of gratitude, you're never going to be looking at things from such a negative perspective that you can't do anything.
Correct.
And I'm constantly telling people like as easy as it would be to look at my life and go that it sucks, it's like think about it. It's pretty great.
It's
My
pretty
life is freaking
in
amazing.
comparative. Yes.
So and I look at some of my so it's easy to get into that analysis where we start comparing to other situations, but uh is it not enough that Grant Cardone was an addict who suffered, whose father passed away when he was a
Hmm.
young man, that he survived? His brother, by the way, he is a twin brother, also a cajillionaire in a completely different industry. It's wild because they are twins. When his brother and him did a podcast, I was a little freaked out. I was the twins freak me out.
Yeah, that's weird. But
Yeah,
look, the comments are always the what I enjoy most about these kind of videos. Stuff like, you know what I mean, born on third base and thinks she hit a triple, right? Like, okay, I get it, right? Nice to see how out of touch reality she is. So young, very inspiring. So like, okay,
so here's what I would say though. If this was a 23-year-old woman who was just like, so I'm just saying, like, then I might have a different opinion, but this is a child. Um,
right.
but I would
Well,
say
and
that
I agree with you. You and I covered a video not too long ago, a couple months back, where the she was complaining about essentially working 40 hours a week for the
it
rest of
was
her
a it was
life.
it, yeah, it was a gal who had to commute from Jersey to New York City, and she's like, by the time I get home, I work 40 plus hours. How do I have time for anything else? So we all looked at her and went, "Yeah, sweetheart, that's how that goes, right?"
Yes. My problem
So
is with these types of videos, and then they get. Danny and I were talking about before we actually started the podcast today because this kind of came up. There are people just the end of last year, beginning of this year, companies and CEOs and CFOs of companies because it's become so popular for them to go on podcasts or have their own podcasts or whatever, and be put in situations where they say what they think or believe, and the world does not take it as a
the
very
right way,
positive thing,
right,
right? You know what I mean? Generations are generational gaps of information are difficult to deal with because of the way they do things differently, right?
right,
Gen Z, for example, valuing their time differently than, say, even a Gen Xer, but especially a baby boomer, right?
right.
Um,
So there's another example. We'll as long as we're discussing this, there was a gal who was fired from Cloudflare, Cloudflare. flare, and she recorded her firing and she posted it. Now, I may have in my lifetime recorded things like this, uh, in situations where an individual had no reasonable expectation of privacy, just so I'm legally covering my behind there. But what I would say is, I might have done that, but I never posted anywhere, and it's kind of sparking an uproar because basically she just wanted them to say that we're just laying everybody off and you're part of that, but they kept saying it was for performance.
Right.
And in the video, at some point, the person on the other end goes, "Listen, you're not going to get us to say what I think you want us to say."
Right.
They just come out and say that we're not going to tell you that.
Right.
Now
We don't
that
have an answer that you're gonna. And look, anybody that's ever worked in corporate America for any length of time that has been let go for really any reason, even if it's of no fault of your own,
right,
corporate America learned a long time ago just not give you a reason. Like, because they don't want the lawsuit, they don't want the, you know what
right,
I mean, any of that. So they're on purpose ambiguous when they're
yep,
doing layoffs or firing.
and
And this lady, and I feel her pain, right?
right,
Just tell me the reason, right? Even people that go from a very positive perspective, I want to know what I can do better so I'm not fired from my
right,
next job, right?
right.
They're not going to give you an answer. And then, of course, that video becomes a TikTok and becomes a
Yeah,
reel
it goes
of her just
viral.
literally begging these people to tell her because she doesn't want to be unemployed. You can tell she needs the
Yeah,
money, right?
yeah, and she's probably doing what a lot of listen. There's a legal perspective here. If she is sued, or sorry,
She
if
sues the
she is
company.
no, if she is let go, for performance, for poor performance, that could prevent her from collecting unemployment. That is a question on some states' unemployment forms. Were you sued for were you fired for poor performance or lack of performance?
In some
So
states, I think it's absences. If you were, you know what I mean? If you're fired for too many
yeah.
absences, you can't get unemployment.
So the one time I ever collected unemployment in my life was during the pandemic, and the company never gave me that I worked for never gave me a reason ever. My performance was superb, was stellar. They never, and the gal just said, we don't, the gal who I talked to repeatedly said, I don't know. So when I filed,
And she may
they
not.
didn't, and here's the thing, nobody disputed anything. So I go, okay, then it's not, that is the only answer because here's what I know. At the end of the day, doesn't matter how big the company is, how small the company is, if they can avoid paying you some money, they're going to do it.
Right,
So by having me go unemployed on unemployment, that affects how they are taxed. So if they could have avoided it, they would have. So they had no reasonable expectation that they could avoid it, which means they were just cut me loose because I don't know why, right?
right. But this
So
is that look, all of these kind of we live in a world where the camera's always on, right?
yeah,
24/7, 7 days a
so
week.
I don't
Um,
blame this girl for that. So getting back to the Sabrina Cardone thing, just to
mhm,
wrap that up, if she had simply said, "Listen, I am in a position that most people are not in.
correct.
I I am lucky that I have a Grant Cardone and an Elena Cardone as a father and mother, but that is no reason why I shouldn't take that opportunity." So here's what I'm saying:
Correct.
it is stupid for people to expect the wealthy to not enrich their children. That is a stupid perspective. My father would much rather write me a check every if he could go on his income tax and say pay income tax or give all the money to your kids. He'd go give all the money to my kids.
Of
Why do I
course.
want so it is silly to expect people not to. And let me tell you something. If you're one of these quacks that I've read about these people that go, well, we don't want our kids to have an edge. We don't want our kids to have an advantage. So we don't read to them because parents who read to their children, the kids have these huge advantage, some calculation. Hey, you're an idiot. You
We can't
shouldn't
we
probably
can't
have
we
kids.
can't be friends. We can't talk to each other. We can't like there are some people that I know that my wife and I know that we cannot spend a lot of time with because of those in that realm of you know what I mean, idea that your parenting style or your education style or whatever doesn't match enough that you can deal with each other, right? You know what I mean?
No,
Because
and and
there's a couple of them that I can't even be around them and their kids because I can't not be a parent when I'm around
right,
kids.
right, right,
I've coached kids, my kids, you know what I mean, football, baseball
right.
teams, and soccer teams my entire life. I am too much of a parent and coach to be around parents and kids that don't parent their. I can't do it because
Yeah.
I want to step in
So,
because that's the coach side of me, right?
right. So I and what I'm saying is, so all that so really, what are we actually complaining about? That a 14-year-old who is
Mm-hmm.
the child of wealthy people said something that was slightly out of touch. Like, oh, I mean, who cares?
Well,
All
not slightly. They said something that's
no,
completely out of touch, but not
correct.
out of touch from their perspective.
So what I'm saying is, if she had simply said, if Sabrina Cardone had simply said, "I'm so lucky to have this opportunity,"
100%.
and because I'm lucky to have this opportunity, what a waste it would be for me to like start a YouTube channel where I put makeup on my face or whatever,
Whatever it is.
instead of instead of learning how to provide actual value to the marketplace through real estate or whatever. The point is, she says, "I'm going to become like I." This is a gal with goals who wants to work. Our complaint about her generation is they don't want to work, they just want it for free. And she says, "Here's how I'm going to work and not get it for free." And everyone's like, "Why would she do that? She should be complaining that she's working at 14 or whatever."
That look, everybody has look the people that that complain about this video, and again, it's not really about Sabrina Cardone. It's a lot of videos that are like this, whether it's
And her
generational
dad,
or
people
wealthy
are saying,
people in general that make these TikTok type of videos that are like this, right? It all comes from the same place, like you said. If they came from a place where here's my situation, I humbly am from this situation. So this is my coming from my perspective because it's what I know, right?
yeah,
Then that would be one thing. But they don't. They don't.
right.
She, in
So,
my opinion, portrays it as this is some brilliant idea she came up with that she
so,
has. And
yeah.
guess what? You're not.
And people,
Look, people
and
make
the
this argument
people,
about Elon Musk. His parents
right.
owned what, a diamond mine, right, or something like that.
Well, okay, that is disputed, but let's just forget that for a moment. That it is he disputes the characterization that his father owned an emerald mine. Let's go on the other end and say it 100% happened. He owned an emerald mine in
Mm-hmm.
Africa. Elon Musk is shooting dick shaped rockets into the sky.
Dick-shaped
Elon Musk
rockets, yes.
Elon Musk is Elon Musk is running 6 companies at the same time.
Correct.
So I think that whatever boost his family of origin gave him, it's not okay.
It's
So he's
definitely
not
benefited a lot of others, not just him.
in the state of Texas. He's building freaking Cybertrucks here. So
Well, and
I
he bought a city down. You are right. There are some people, like you can say the same thing about Michael Dell, right? Michael Dell started Dell Computers with a massive, right, donation from his parents to buy a building here in Round Rock, Texas, right? And whatever. However, you can make that he's made. How many people has he employed in Austin over the
you
years?
know, so and let me just add this to this conversation because this drives me crazy. So for instance, the former president of the United States, he was everyone said, "Hey, he said, my father gave me a small loan of $1 million." Is your assumption that if you get $1 million, you'll turn it into 1 billion? Then why are there even millionaires? Because if it's so easy to become a billionaire with $1 million, everyone who had $1 million, every ball player, every lottery winner, they should all be billionaires. Because once you have $1 million, according to the way you're characterizing it, you just fart out another 100x. You just fart out another, like you're just farting gold now? No, it
I
takes.
agree with what you're saying. I do.
So let me
However,
just say this also. If I'm Grant Cardone and the government says, if you add your 14-year-old child to your payroll and give them 60 grand a year, you can avoid giving that 60 grand to the federal government so we can print more money, devalue,
which
base your
is kind of
currency,
true, actually. You
and
should
send it to a
all
foreign.
companies should hire your children. Go ahead.
So what I'm saying is Grant Cardone is only doing the most reasonable thing that a person who is reasonable. And the people who are disagreeing with that, you shouldn't do that for your child. You're fascist.
Well,
You're
no, I agree
disgusting
with that
fascist.
perspective.
You shouldn't have children. I'm glad the LA Times fired you. I hope you drink bad water and you get sterilized. You're awful people.
Again,
You're the freaking worst.
I agree with you, but I'm taking it back to if you make a tone deaf social media post to the ether,
Yeah,
you're going to have to deal with the
you're,
consequences of
you're
that.
not wrong. You're not incorrect. Here's all I'm saying. 14 in insofar as 14-year-old girls being tone deaf on TikTok, this is the least of our concerns. There are way more concerns. You can go on
Okay.
TikTok right now and just scroll for 3 days straight of teenagers being anti-Semitic. This is
Again,
the least of
we're
our
not picking
problems.
on 14-year-old girls here.
No,
We are talking about people that make tone deaf
that
information for
so
social media. So
so
it's not
I
about
I
her age. It's not even about her being Grant Cardone's kid. It's about the fact that there are people
and
that make these tone deaf videos that at
yeah.
some point you have to go. You knew when you did this it wasn't a smart thing to do. At
So
some point, someone had to say to
there,
her
that's
or
fine.
someone else, say,
Yeah,
"Hey, this wasn't a good idea." If a and when you say, because you keep coming back to how old she is,
well,
again,
okay. Let me
14-year-old knows the difference between right and wrong. If a
true.
15-year-old goes on video and wears blackface as a white kid and posts it on whatever because they think it's funny and everybody's laughing around, that person's going to have consequences from the ether that is the
Yeah.
internet.
So
And you can't just go, well, the 15-year-old doesn't know what the hell they're doing.
listen.
Yes, they
Okay.
did.
Okay. Let me put it to you. Let me contextualize, close this story out and contextualize it like this. She may be very intelligent. Okay.
Again,
Other
probably more
teenagers.
intelligent than I am.
Uh, but here's the difference. With age comes wisdom.
Correct.
Wisdom is living a long life, learning from your mistakes, and guess what? You really cannot gain wisdom without living. It's just so
Wisdom is earned, not just given, right? Like, and
so
that's why
you
older people are wiser, is because
yeah.
they've earned that
And
wisdom.
and so I think that, in the coming age where we are no longer going to we you and I lived through a time where we downloaded Instagram for the first time and we were the first people to have it or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The next these gen the Zoomers and the alpha kids,
Yeah, Gen Alpha. Yeah,
this is just the way of life for them, right?
correct.
That is to say, they don't know different, they don't know any better, and if we don't extend them some, listen, we have to extend a certain amount of grace of going. I was talking to one of my friends and he said, if half of what you and I did as kids was on YouTube, we would be in prison. Like we couldn't
You
have
and me
done
both, brother.
like
If
he's
the
just he's
internet, like it is today, was around in the 80s and 90s when I was a
yeah,
child,
yeah.
no, nobody would ever do anything. Like, no,
There
of
would
course.
Yeah, we'd all be in a prison cell somewhere. We would be doing this podcast live from the federal penitentiary.
Yes, I would
So
be canceled 15,000 times over. You,
yeah,
me, and
yeah,
everybody else.
right. I mean, dude, we're adults. If our group chat leaks, we're going. It was nice to know you, dude. So, all
That's
right,
funny.
I think we have this last story. Let's just jump into
Yeah,
this
what do
one.
we got?
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Well, okay. Is this a follow up? Because on Wednesday, or I think it was Wednesday, we talked about WWE selling Raw's rights to Netflix, right?
Raw really takes on a different context in this story, doesn't it? Uh, uh, does this? I think this means Vince won't be at the poker game on Thursday. But
Yeah, he's not gonna be.
so Vince McMahon resigns from TKO, which is the parent company to WWE, over a Me Too lawsuit. Now,
Mhm.
I'm going to go ahead and say something. Uh, this is a rough one because I like Vince McMahon. I never cared about wrestling. I like Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon took a loan from his old man. He created the greatest. He carved out a lane of entertainment
Yes.
for low class Americans that I love. I love how,
When
yeah,
you
I
look at
just,
it from a business perspective, you have to respect what this guy's done,
that's what I'm saying.
right? When
So
you take anything about who he may or may not be personally, from a
yeah,
business perspective, this man has hustled and created an empire,
right.
right? That
As
has benefited
and
countless
let me tell you
numbers of
something.
people.
Where where would the Fast and Furious series be without Dwayne the Rock Johnson? Without John Cena?
Where would Dwayne the
Where?
Rock Johnson be without
Yeah,
WWE? John Cena, where would he? Where would have he gotten his break to become John Cena without it?
right.
So, from a business perspective, this guy has forged an empire, and I
Where
appreciate that.
where
However,
would Ronda Rousey have gone after she broke her entire face in UFC?
Rowdy, what Piper, right?
Yeah,
She took on to
yeah,
Randy Piper's persona, right, or
right.
whatever. Yeah,
Yeah,
love me some Ronda Rousey. That is anyway.
yeah,
The point is, I love a woman that I think could kick my butt. It's just a thing that I have.
yeah. I
Okay,
don't know what's there's something wrong with
it's
you,
a scary
but
thing.
that's neither here nor there.
But the news
So
article is essentially Vince McMahon resigns from TKO over sex assault allegations. But here's the phrase that really gets me, because again, and I'm not discrediting any sexual assault. It's horrible. Nobody should have to
yeah,
go through it or whatever. But the part of this lawsuit that gets me is accusing him of sexual assault, but and trafficking. That's the
that's
phrase
a
that
rough
really
one.
got me. That's
That's a rough one.
for you to
That is a
be
rough charge.
it's one thing for you to be accused of and taken to court over sexual assault, right? It's
But that
another thing for them to be able to put on a lawsuit trafficking.
Yeah, so if they hit you with that T word, here's what I would say. The trafficking word. His audience consists of a lot of people who saw the Sound of Freedom movie and liked it, thought it was accurate, true. And I'm not saying it's not accurate and true. I'm just saying his audience consists of people who saw that. And the minute you attach that word to a case and you go, it's rough. Now,
Yeah.
I think in this context, it's not as heinous as the word usually implies. It's just from what I understand, it was an adult woman who was sent on an airplane places to perform favors for people. Now, this is a rough story, and I don't think Vince McMahon survives this. I think he's old. I think he was retiring anyway. I think he just kind of disappears after this.
Well, and this is kind of honestly, it's round two in the last 2 years, or last year actually, last 12 months. Last year he stepped down, right, from WWE before the merger, I think, to the TKO company,
Yeah,
to because of certain allegations and him paying to cover certain things up or whatever,
right.
and then a couple of months later, 4 or 5 months later, he gets appointed to this board, right, that now owns all of this kind of stuff. And here it is a couple of months later. So in the last like 8 months or so, this is kind of the second thing that's come up against him. And I think you're
Yeah.
right. I think this is the nail in the coffin for him. Again, not that Vince McMahon is going to be poor tomorrow. This is
No,
not going to affect how he lives out the
it's
rest
not
of
going to
his
affect his
life.
money.
It's not
I
going to
don't
affect
even
his
think,
money.
and I think that you know, uh, I don't think his audience abandons the platform of WWE. I don't think so.
Look, I don't think this. Look, I think we have learned to a certain extent in today's world to separate people from their companies, especially really big companies.
As they should.
Um, and they should, but it wasn't always the case. Something like this could completely deteriorate a company 20 years ago. Like
Right.
sully the name and the stock price plummets, and then, you know what I mean? Whatever.
Right.
Something like a CEO or the face of a company
Of a
could
major
really
brand like
damage
WWE.
that
Right.
brand in the 90s, in the 80s,
You're right.
right? And stuff like that. However, in today's world, I think we've figured out that this person can be a horrible person, and that has nothing to do with the financial stability of the company they work with, right?
Exactly. And I think that his audience in particular, uh,
I
his
don't think his
audience,
audience gives a crap about these out,
his
or
audience
even
is
if
the
he's
type.
convicted. These people that go to these events or pay to watch these events on TV could give a
Right.
crap less what's going on in Vince McMahon's life.
You're not wrong at all, and I'll give you an example. His audience largely elected a person who said he likes to grab him by the kitty
Yes,
cat.
it's the same people.
So
It's the same
it,
folks by and large, right?
100%.
Okay, and again, I, I watched the wrestling when I was younger, the Von Erichs, and you know what I mean,
Yeah.
Abdullah the Butcher and Junkyard Dog, and
Right.
right, uh, Lumberjack Bill Duggan or whatever his name was. Like those were, but I haven't watched wrestling since. And there's a lot of people that enjoy wrestling that aren't necessarily those folks. I don't want to paint
Right.
everybody with a broad brush.
I do.
However, it is a large percentage,
Yep.
and they're not going to care about this lawsuit. But again, to me, this is a big deal when it comes to look. The bigger you get, I had a mentor of mine that said the bigger you get, one of the fears of growing as a business, as a person in entrepreneurial business, whatever, the bigger you get, the more of a target you become.
Right.
Period. Right?
Which is why uh, some of my goals in my lifetime have changed. Not because I don't believe in myself or I don't believe in what I am doing. It's simply because I go, do I really want to start a business and it becomes so big? I'd much rather just be like anonymous. So like
Well,
I would so here's what I would say. Some people have this goal of being rich and famous. My goal is to be absurdly wealthy and completely anonymous.
right.
That is my goal. But I'm
Yours and
doing a
mine both, brother.
podcast. Yeah, so that kind of we kind of screwed the pooch on that one.
Now,
But
there's a difference. There's a difference between
yeah,
right there. You and I could you can be on this podcast, and again, when it becomes extremely successful, you become a person that people may recognize. But that doesn't mean that you are a massive target in the way
yeah,
that
you're
Vince
not
McMahon
Tom
is.
Cruise.
Right.
You're
You're
not
not
Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise. You and I are never going to be Vince McMahon. You and I are never. You know what I mean? Like
Hopefully
it.
not.
There's a difference, right?
Yeah.
There's podcast famous and then there's famous, and
Yeah.
you know what I mean. Like,
We could definitely never be Vince McMahon because I read some of what he's accused of doing, and if that's even remotely true, I'm out, bro.
the Walmart family is not inviting us for Thanksgiving. I will never be on that level, nor do I want to be.
Well,
Okay.
speak for yourself, dude. I'm not that far away from the walls.
Because I'm sure they eat Soylent Green and people eat people at that level of wealth. But
Yeah, they're
my
doing their
problem is,
stuff.
right? You know what I mean? The blood of
Yeah.
babies to keep young and stuff like that. But the point here is
Just is this a bad time to tell you that we have a option contract from Walmart Radio that we were supposed to review after the show? So,
right. That old
all
radio
right.
thing. I hope they're not a sponsor. Um,
Yeah.
but look, this is obviously anything when it comes to these kind of accusations should be taken seriously. It is perfectly acceptable and proper for TKO Group to say, "Hey, you at least need to step away until these things are figured out." I
Right.
actually wish more companies would do that kind of thing.
Right.
Versus, I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, Blizzard Entertainment Group, right, the people
Right.
that make World of Warcraft and stuff like that, went through the CEO or CFO, somebody on the board, went through a period of allegations like this, and that person 100% refused to step away while it was going on, and it created a insane environment. Think about all the people that reported to that person, that then report to those people, that then report to those people, right?
Right.
So that person refused to step away, and because of their not only title but their ownership in the company, didn't allow the company to push them out either. So it created a 6 month cycle of insanity within the company, right?
Yeah.
So it's
And
perfectly okay
I
for them to say, hey, you need to step away.
so here's I think McMahon is looking at this and going, um, people with money want to keep their money. And Vince McMahon is going, so people found out I pooped on somebody. So it's going to mess with my billions of dollars. I just signed this huge $5 billion deal with
Mm-hmm.
Netflix. So I don't want me pooping on someone to get in the way of my money, which, by the way, is one of the accusations listed in the lawsuit. Did I throw up when I read it? Just a little bit. So
Danny was
listen,
very. I don't know whether it was disappointed or intrigued by the fact that I knew the street name for that particular act.
the
It
Cleveland
disturbed
Steamer, baby.
it disturbed Danny a little bit. That
Our
but
partnership almost dissolved when the word steamer came out of his mouth.
what are you
Right?
gonna do, man? What are you gonna
Yeah,
do?
I guess. What are you gonna do?
All right, I think that's our show for this weekend.
That's
I
right.
think we'll be
Hey,
back this coming week.
we will. I have one last thing to tell you. Today I tried a drink. It's called green tea. It is coffee, but for vegans, and it is just as reprehensible as vegans. It's terrible. I don't know why anybody drinks it. It's the
Why do
worst.
you have to piss everybody off before we leave the show, Danny? Well, every time you just here's a group of people we
The
need to
truth is the truth. The
completely.
facts are the facts.
All right, folks. If we can, if anybody allows us, we'll probably be back next week.
Yes, that's right.
See y'all soon.